to A Joy to Be Me, a podcast sharing the magic of minerals, microbes, and a return back to nature's ways. Tune in to learn how to nourish yourself emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. It's time to reconnect with and deepen the fundamentals of human health so we can return to our wild state. I'm your host, Lydia Joy. Let's celebrate this wild ride we call the human experience. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I hope you got to witness the Cancer full moon yesterday. I spent some time yesterday evening just journeying and in reflection, and a lot of things around my motherhood came up. And I have one of my sons is a Cancer sun and a Cancer moon. So I sat with like my journey with him and my pregnancy with him and just some beautiful things. It was really lovely. Cancer is the mother of the zodiac, by the way, in case you didn't know that. So it seemed quite appropriate. And today I want to reflect on, a profound kind of conversation that begins with our mothers. Of course, it extends far beyond that, but this is for anyone really, whether you're a mother or not, or you hope to be a mother, or you are someone who's just simply interested in deeply understanding how to build health. Let's call it health wealth. Like create new patterns of health in your life and your children's, right? Like if you really want to deeply understand, I think you'll enjoy this conversation, because what I'm really trying to paint the picture of is like, why are we collectively experiencing chronic health issues and burnout, right? We really have to go back and understand the environment that has led to this. And I think, understanding that I truly believe we are all born into some degree of deficit these days. Degeneration is a real thing. And if we wish to shift towards regenerative ways of living, regenerating human health, we got to acknowledge this. So the work of Weston Price was one of the first places that I started to tap into this, along with the insights from many books, much study, but another one was Deep Nutrition. These two in particular opened my eyes to understanding this a bit. And it was interesting because I started reading Nourishing Traditions when I was pregnant with my fourth son. I hadn't found it until then. I was reading all kinds of health stuff, starting with my first son. But by the time I got to number 4, I was like, someone gave me Sally Fallon's Nourishing Traditions. And I was like, oh my goodness, why didn't I know about this sooner, right? So if you haven't explored like ancestral nutrition, these are just a couple of places you can find some information. Definitely look at that. But just please don't make it dogmatic. Please don't make it like a rigid, like religious, like framework that you try to follow to the letter of some ridiculous manner. It's really just deeper information and insight to like work from, that isn't being talked about in a lot of, like hasn't been talked about in a lot of mainstream ways. And it certainly isn't something that, our parents are educating us on, unfortunately, and we definitely can't rely on the school system to educate us on health. That's for sure. So in my last episode, I discussed how chronic health issues can lead to a state of breakdown in our bodies, right? That catabolic state. And it's much like financial bankruptcy. And until we can address this deficit and stop the drains on our health, we really can't achieve like stability or growth, which are essential for healing and get us out of that state, right? And get us stable and get us like be able to really deeply heal. So this is where I want to talk about the mother line, the mother wound. There's a lot of aspects of this that we could look at. Maybe you've heard some of those, as well as our connection to this earth, our planet, our ultimate mother, because we're born from the earth, which is what continues to nourish us if we learn to reconnect with it more thoroughly. So we start with our birth mothers, the woman who carried us in their wombs, and we think about their mothers too. Because in a biological sense, the eggs that would become us were formed while our mothers were still in their mother's wombs. So this really highlights the importance of, generational health, the interconnectedness of the generations, how each mother and grandmother was nourished affects our health and equips us to face our environment. So it's really important for us to look at this because it's really up to us to nourish ourselves so we have healthy offspring, so they stand a chance at learning from us and also doing the same. Now, to be fair, I'm going to say this. My grandmother was born in the 1920s. That's 100 years ago. I'm 50. Okay, by the way. So 100 years ago, my grandmother was alive in an incredibly different time in history with a lot of different things going on the heels of like World War I, lots of shifts, very different time, far less crazy toxins than we have now. However, it was the beginning of all of that starting to monumentally increase. So even still, like, we need to do better now and understand this now because, I don't know how things are going to go. None of us do. Like, I have a lot of hope that things are going to turn around, but I don't see it happening quickly. And so we really all have our due diligence to do here. And it's important to not overlook this. It's important to acknowledge this so that we can really start to come up with game plans and nurture ourselves more deeply, and really see the biological imperative, if you will, to do this, right? To help ourselves and our children and the future generations. So if you're preparing to be parents, oh my goodness, understanding this can really be invaluable for you. And it still is invaluable even post. Like, even to me now, it's really helping me make amendments and adjustments and help us walk through our challenges. Like, so we're not beating ourselves up, and there's a lot to say about this, but I'm going to try not to go down too many rabbit holes. Now, again, like before the Industrial Revolution, before the early 1920s, like way before that, families and tribes would have prioritized deep nourishment across generations, right? Like, it just would have been inborn. Like, it would have been the role of the family to teach the next and the next and the next, just so that we could continue to prioritize the survival of our species, of our family lineage and such. We knew like that there's no way we're gonna thrive if we can't survive. So it was like a very important piece of our lives was to focus on that and teach that and support that, right? These days, no one has a clue about any of that stuff. You find out you're pregnant, then you have a few prenatal visits with some blood work, and some of the testing is so freaking outdated. You're given a bottle of prenatal vitamins, which often are not that great. If you're not in optimal health, you might struggle through your pregnancy. You may have some morning sickness. You may not always feel so great. So then, that makes it even harder to eat really, really well, and have adequate nutrition, right? Like, you guys understand, right? So, for me personally, I was born into, like, my mother was already in a depleted, weakened state. right? So a mother's health, her nutrition, her well-being, the stress that she was under, all directly impact the health of her child. So if you're somebody who's like, I've had stuff going on my entire life, right? Well, this could be why, in part, right? So if you're feeling like burned out, maybe you feel defeated or frustrated, or I don't know, like there's a lot of emotion and mental, psychological stress with, long-term health challenges, right? So like I feel like this is crucial to see, to accept, because a lot of times I think we resist what is, or maybe we don't understand it's in the backdrop. And this can create a lot of internal conflict when really, if we just embrace it, that it's peace, it can help us, it can help us realize like, oh my gosh, well, maybe if that's true, I need to do something different. I need more support. I need to look at this a whole different way. Right. So, this is what I'm saying. Like, what if part of healing from chronic health issues involves accepting your life as a whole? I can't tell you how many people I've sat with over the years. I've said the same things myself, who are like, I don't understand why, I changed my diet. Maybe it's only been 6 months. Maybe it's been a year. Maybe it's been 2 years. And I'm taking these supplements and I'm just not better. There's so much in the backdrop going on that has led to this point in your life, right? So if you're not ready for this conversation, it's okay. I'm trying to go deep here. I'm trying to get to the environment. I'm trying to get to beyond the roots. Some people can't even handle just getting to the roots. It's like we just want to fix it now, today. Why do I feel like this? It's okay. It's okay. If you're not ready, you can pause. You can just start trying to, get some modern nutritional solutions, right? Like getting nourished is the start. That's what I did myself. And while it helped, it really was only a starting point. And truth be told, I think nutrition opens the door to a deeper self-discovery. I think it opens the door to, really helping us become just evolved humans, which is what we need at this time. But there's a lot of confusion about nutrition. Like there's a lot of dogma, there's a lot of deception, there's a lot of conflict. So sometimes it takes people a while to come to peace and just eat real food and just like enjoy their food. Right? So there can be a lot of like, stress to get to the point where you feel somewhat at peace, right? All right. Well, that said, I still want to talk about like how to repair and rebuild. Let's call it the mother line, if you will, from where you came from, the environment that you were built from, right? I think because chronic health issues are on the rise, we really need to confront this within ourselves. And we we really need the women to engage in this process, and we need the men to support us. Men, we really need you. You know, honestly, I feel like the health deficit that we are facing is far more concerning than even just like the economic deficit. Over the years, I've really witnessed kind of the increase in this and the urgency of this. It's been prevalent for me. I mean, for me, I had some tumultuous years. And it was not easy. And I can't imagine. I'm well aware that I'm not the only one, and a lot of times when I'm talking to the women that I'm supporting and I'm asking them health history questions, they have no idea anything about their mother's health. They're like, I honestly don't even know. Quite frankly, I never even thought about that. And then they also unfortunately lack understanding of their own bodies. And listen, I want to say this. this is true for a lot of people. We are very disconnected to our bodies. And this is not something that would have been the case long ago. We would have had much deeper intuition. Why? Because the elders would have taught us. Our mothers, our grandmothers, it would have been something that would have been continually passed along. And I think that it's heartbreaking that we're here. But here we are nonetheless. And I do believe we can turn it around. I've been spending the last multiple decades doing that for myself, and that's why I'm here to share. And I hope that, I can support others on this too. So after a baby is born, the environment they grow up in is just as crucial as prenatal nutrition, the state of the mom's health, and the grandmother, right? Adequate nutrition, both macro, micro, all the nutrients, the minerals, the things that we need for a healthy microbiome. This is vital for a baby's growth and development. So insufficient nutrition, insufficient nourishment can literally have lifelong consequences. And I am here to say this is true. It's very true. It's been my experience. Right? And it's not just nutrition alone, right? We have to remember the environment, okay? Because it sets the stage for how well we're able to survive or thrive. Our physical bodies, they are intricate systems that we are composed of matter. We're shaped by the matrix of our experiences, our environment, our ancestry, right? So because we find our physical bodies in such disarray these days, and a sense of disconnect, we really need to explore how each of these pieces influences our health, right? Like at the core, our physical body is made of matter, cells, tissues, organs that require proper nourishment to function optimally. The quality of the food we consume, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the sunshine that we're exposed to, the movement that we get. The connection, the community, the family support system, right? These all affect the state of our bodies. They all contribute to it. All right. So we know that when we nourish ourselves even with the nutrient dense foods, especially if you studied nutrient dense foods comes from, nourishing traditions and Weston Price work. That's like a term, like it's definitely part of that paradigm, right? We can provide our bodies with all the building blocks that we need for healing and vitality. So we already know that most of us did not experience that. And that has led to all this deficiency, inflammation, all the health problems, right? So we know that just like understanding nutrition alone is huge. But when we understand the concept of matrix, it refers to the intricate web of all of these pieces together, the relationships and systems that support our existence, right? So we have to think about all of it, like our family dynamics, our social connections, our cultural influences, right? This is like the matrix in which we live, and it shapes our beliefs, behaviors, and our health, right? So stressful environments, lack of support, negative thought patterns, all can significantly impact our physical well-being. They can be considered stressors, right? If we can turn that around and nurture healthy relationships, have, supportive community, we can create a positive matrix that promotes healing and resilience. So I think it's important to think of it in this way, like understanding your matrix that you came from really helps you understand what has led to the toxic influences that has, contributed to any state of chronic physical disarray you might be in. And then, of course, I'm all about nature, rewilding our wellness over here, right? We have to acknowledge our connection to Mother Earth. She is the source of our nourishment and vitality. And this is where we get the resources, right? This is how we can actually thrive, right? The fresh foods, the clean water, the balanced ecosystem. But here we are in modern society, completely disconnected from it all. and completely removed from it all, right? And it's only increasing. So this is why, reconnecting with the natural world, it can really enhance our well-being, right? I talk about being outside and being deep in nature immersion and seasonal eating and all these things. This is a piece of our environment. So understanding that aspect of your mother's life and her mother's life also can be helpful. I mean, maybe you already have experienced some of that because of them, and thankfully that has helped you also implement some of this in your life, right? So I think when we honor our relationship with Mother Earth, that's another way we tap into a deeper source of healing and nourishment. All right. So in light of the whole, you and I know we don't just exist in a vacuum in isolation, right? We're very influenced by the matter that we consume, the matrix of our relationships, our beliefs, our connection to Mother Earth. So by recognizing the interplay of all of this, then we can begin to address the disarray within our bodies, start to cultivate a more holistic approach that really can honor our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, right? All right. That said, I'm a story kind of gal. So I want to share just a little bit, really quick, nothing lengthy here, of my own kind of like my own mother and her mother, just as an example for you. So you can actually start to explore this yourself, right? So I'll start with my grandmother. Like I said, she was born in the 1920s. She lived a long life. She died, oh gosh, was she 95, 93, 98? I don't know. She was in her 90s. She lived a long life. Still mobile, still moving around, still doing things, right? I don't know much about her pregnancies or her births, but she had 4 daughters. I don't really even know a whole lot about her overall health. Before she had my mother, I do know the time that she was in. It was a very, and I don't know what that was like for her, but I can only imagine the aftermath of World War I, the stress of that, the big world changes going on in that era, right? Like I can imagine to some degree there was some stress, right? And then next, my mother, being the youngest of the 4 that my grandmother had, she was young. She was 24 when she had me. And I don't know a whole lot about her either. I know that she weighed 90 something pounds. So 5'7". So 97 pounds is like, or 90 something pounds. I don't know the exact number, but she was kind of frail. During her pregnancy with me, she was told she was anemic. I'm pretty sure she took iron pills, which is a standard recommendation then. And unfortunately, oh man, not much has changed. She had numerous silver fillings, like a lot of them, as well as kyphosis, which is a back deformation that my grandfather also experienced quite severely, to the point where he had a severe hunchback, if you will, like severe. And I also have the kyphosis, by the way. I know that breastfeeding was a challenge for her. I don't think she was able to do it for very long. So I was on some degree of formula. So those are just a few things my mother was dealing with. And here's how they could impact her body and therefore me, aka the fetus, while I was in utero. Now keep in mind, in my last episode, I talked about the cell danger response and how that impacts us. I believe we can inherit this, congenitally speaking. Most people confuse this with genetics. I'm not talking about genetics. I'm talking about in utero. There's a lot that can happen in utero that we're not taking account for, including like inheriting your mother's mineral imprint and her microbiome imprint, if you will, for simplicity's sake, as well as her heavy metal imbalances, right? So this is where I'm going with this. So let's start with anemia and being underweight. Here's what can occur in a body. There is physical stress from anemia and being underweight because it can actually trigger the body's stress response. It can have an increased stress response. An increased stress response can lead to, anxiety or depression or some type of an imbalance in the mood. It also leads to fatigue and weakness because what's going on? Well, there's a lack of red blood cells to carry oxygen throughout the body. So this is like a constant fatigue. It can impact motivation. It can impact energy levels. It can make it harder to engage in daily activities. We know that low energy levels can contribute to how we feel, our moods, our irritability, and increase the feelings of anything like anxiety, sadness. It can be incredibly overwhelming, and it can make it harder to handle situations that they normally would handle well. Anemia can affect cognitive abilities. It can affect our concentration, our memory, our decision making, right? We're not getting enough oxygen to our brain, right? So this can result in frustration and even a decrease in our self-esteem. All right. Here's what can go down with silver fillings, amalgams, which contain primarily mercury, but also copper and some silver and tin. So when the metal fillings are okay, and then I just want to say one little caveat. You're already in a depleted state, right? Then you add the heavy metal in there on top of it. Not good, right? So with metal fillings, moms are inhaling, anyone is with metal fillings, but in this case, the mom, she's going to be inhaling mercury vapors for however long the metal fillings have been in her mouth, which it's just like an ongoing drip of stress to the body. It's like drip, 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 stress, 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 right? All that mercury continually just like slowly being emitted. And this leads to things like cognitive decline, right? Which is your memory, your attention, your problem-solving abilities. When you have this going on, it can lead to frustration. It can lead to, decreased self-esteem. You may feel some anxiety about your mental performance, like your cognitive performance. We know that mercury exposure has been linked to mood disorders. People can have, increased irritability, depression, anxiety, and the toxic effects on the brain can alter our neurotransmitter systems. Oh man, it seems like everyone's neurotransmitter systems are so out of balance these days, right? Like it's just everyone. But that said, this affects the mood. It changes the mood, right? So that chronic exposure, then what does it do? It affects our energy. It leads to fatigue. It affects our motivation. It makes it hard to do what we have to do every day. And it even affects our social connections. And mercury, one of the biggest things it can do is disrupt your sleep, leading to insomnia, restless sleep. Poor sleep quality can further exacerbate your mood and your cognition. And, then the body's response to that chronic exposure can lead to heightened stress levels, right? So people are going to feel constantly on edge. They're going to struggle with anxiety or coping in general, right? And as that continues and worsens in somebody, they may end up feeling more withdrawn and less able to, have loving interactions, social interactions, be emotionally supportive to others because they feel, so overwhelmed. And this can lead to some degree of isolation in their life that, takes them away from deeper support. And, it just can go on and on, right? Like you get the point, right? So in severe cases, the long-term mercury exposure can actually lead to more serious psychological disorders, including neuropsychiatric symptoms like memory loss, even like tremors, some of the things that are present in the biggies of, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, right? Anyways, all that to say, those are just a couple of things that were in the backdrop for me in utero, and for my mother in her life. And And in addition, I've talked about this before, as a child, I wasn't well nourished in many ways, right? Typical standard American diet at the time, fluoride treatments constantly, the regular immunizations and vaccines, which thankfully back then I think I only got like 12 total, which is kind of amazing considering where things are at now. And so of course my home environment, it was stable. We had everything we needed. The basics were covered. But, there were definitely underlying psychological, mental life stressors, right? Like, pretty like in the backdrop, right? I think this is very common for a lot of us. I think we all have something, right, that was going on. Another big thing that was going on in my house was we had water damage. We always had the basement like hold water. And this was normal. It just was normal in like old houses with old cement basements and such. And this was before we knew about mold, right? But I lived in that my entire childhood. So, okay. When I started having children, I myself had been struggling with immune issues for over a decade, battling respiratory issues, sinus problems, seasonal allergies, asthma. By the time I became pregnant for the first time, I was already in less than optimal health. And thankfully, this did spark my interest in studying health more deeply. Right. So that's just I'm just trying to paint a picture here. I'm sure as I'm saying this, you're starting to like think about your own story, right? Now we know that prenatal stress increases health risks, mental health being one. So many women today are facing a lot more stress during pregnancy, and they're already in some level of less than optimal state of nourishment, right? And this is why I feel it's like important to talk about this and actually see it and not ignore it, so we can start to implement deeper solutions and actually even be willing to, right? Because we have to shine a light on what's lurking in the shadows. Otherwise, it'll stay lurking in the shadows. But when we shine a light on it, we can see it and be like, oh crap, this is here. And it's like, well, now we got to do something about it, right? So when a mother is stressed, and I'm not just talking about like casually stressed, like in the moment, right? Like, but like you have constant stressors in your system, like the ones I just explained. It affects how her body responds during pregnancy. And I didn't even go into like what mineral imbalances that could have been there, but I have my ideas of what that could look like just because of my experience. Right? But this level of stress, if it's more chronic with all these drips of things that are hitting the body and just causing it to have to be in a stress response, it really affects the baby, the developing brain of the baby. Okay. And there's a lot that could go on here. I don't want to get into it too deep, but it can lead to differences in brain size and function in a baby, because most of our brain development occurs in the womb before we are born, right? And this is like really important to understand. So now, not every child exposed to stressors in the womb is going to like develop a mental health problem per se. I do think there's a lot of nuance here to consider, right? Like, so I'm not like, just, understand that that's just at the backdrop, right? That said, the time right after a baby is born is also very crucial for brain development. So there's still a chance to influence the baby's brain through the environment that they are in. Okay. There's even like some research that shows like children who face like early hardships, like extreme hardships, were able to still thrive once they were in a more supportive environment, a family setting that was supportive. They got a lot of love, care, nourishment that way, and other ways too, right? And the younger that they are, and that happens, the better chance they have to do all right. Now, the other thing is after birth, how mothers cope with stress can affect their caregiving. How many of us know about this one, right? High stress can make it harder for mothers to connect with and care for their babies. You've probably watched movies or heard stories of women who are so stressed out for various reasons, and the baby comes and they're just like, oh my gosh, I don't even want this baby on me. Like, I can't. I'm just exhausted. I'm like, and it's sad, but it's like their physiology is really struggling to lead them to feel that way. Right? And this can then increase risks for the baby. So, understanding the environment and the nurturing environment after the baby's born is very crucial too. So please understand that can help counteract the negative effects of prenatal stress. Okay. 2 of my pregnancies in particularly were extremely stressful. I had some pretty serious circumstances and stressors during those 2 in particular, but all of my pregnancies, there was a lot going on, and I hadn't replenished effectively in between pregnancies. Thankfully, I have 0 metal fillings in my mouth. I have no metal in my body that I'm aware of, but I'm sure I had some my whole life because of my mother. My first and my last kids, those 2 kiddos, unfortunately, they have had more complications than my middle 2. My first was more stressful than any, in that I ended up having complications. In the last 2 months, I was in the hospital. I was on bed rest. He ended up being emergency C-section. He was born a little early, so I wasn't able to really breastfeed him. So those are some big things that definitely impacted him. And then my final child, I was in an unhealthy environment, my marriage situation. I've mentioned that before. And I was in massive fight or flight, like, whoo, man. And it really affected him. And he had a lot of complications the first 7 years of his life, which I've talked about on the podcast before. So thankfully, I learned a lot. I was able to do what I could. I wish I could have done more, don't we all? But, I just want to say there's a lot we can still do, even if we find ourselves here, right? And the more I got support, the more I was able to cover my bases for me, for them, and, able to help them recover from whatever things that they were dealing with. And, we have no chronic health issues going on in our family, thankfully. So I can say that understanding my history as well as my mother's, it has been invaluable. It's illuminated how, our backgrounds really shape us and impact our health. And this understanding is part of why I committed really deeply to the mineral balancing work over the years, because it's enabled me to just like work through the layers. There's a lot of complexity that we've all, built up in this lifetime, right? And I was able to just work through that slowly and steadily over time, support my kids in manageable ways, a couple times a year. It's also what led me to delve into the microbiome work I now do to rebuild all of our guts, since, right, that's something that also mothers pass along to their babies in utero, which we are starting to understand more deeply now. Right. I have a few episodes on that in the past, just in general. I'll probably talk about it a lot more this year as well. And, thankfully, because I made this important and a priority, even though it was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a learning curve. And, I did the best I could, and I kept at it. And I think my example to my children has really helped. They've learned a lot from me. So they make different choices in the world than many of their peers do. Right. So they did get somewhat of a good foundation in hindsight. And now that they're all a little older, they're starting to actually like really seek my guidance. And they do have some really good habits in place, even though it's not as perfect as I want it to be. I think they're doing all right. So that's, like in retrospect, there's a lot we can do as parents, even if this is the case. So please see the silver lining in this story, but also see the imperativeness of it, right? Like, I think it's a very important topic. It's very, very big deal. That's all I want to say. It's intense too, right? Like I've gone through waves of grief over the time. And I am a single mom. I raised kids by myself. So it's like I didn't have someone alongside of me like helping me out. Like I grieve a lot for that, right? Like not being able to have better for them and do better for them, right? Like I think that's just literally a part of being a parent. I did share an episode last Mother's Day about like, is it mom guilt or mom grief? So if you haven't checked that episode out, it's a short one. It's definitely worth a moment. But I'm grateful for the depth of knowledge that I have and understanding the history a bit more because it really allows me to build upon it. And not have it like dwelling in the backdrop, like not knowing or having these lingering weird things that I don't understand about myself, right? Like I think it's just really helpful to know where we came from, right? Like knowing where we came from and how we entered this life is incredibly powerful. I think many people don't know themselves deeply in these times, and this disconnect can really perpetuate further challenges. And I don't think that we can interrupt chronic patterns truly until we acknowledge what led to them. So I really think we need to sit with our histories and reckon with them and come to terms with the whole of our lives if we can. I know I'm not saying do this, you're going to do this today in one time. Like, right. I'm just like suggesting start to take a look, right? Like I said, we can't see what lurks in the shadows until we shine a light on it. And once we do, it's not as frightening. Over time, it just simply is. We can come to acceptance about it. We can let this knowledge inform us, enabling us to choose new ways of being instead of remaining in the dark, repeating patterns born of ignorance and lack of education, as well as our conditioning and, the ever-changing environment that we just kind of, had to do what we could at the times, and now we're in the age of like information, if you will. And there's a lot that we can figure out because of research and also because here we are in this collective, like hot messness, right? So I believe that a crucial aspect of healing from chronic health issues is repairing our relationship with ourselves. This lets us access the very soil, the very environment from which our roots grew. So when we discuss root causes so much, the root causes of chronic health, I really think we have to look at the importance of the soil. And this to me means like both our inner ecosystem and the soil, like our environment, the soil of our environment, including just the soil that our food was grown in. It's kind of somewhat metaphorical, but even our inner ecosystem, like we're talking about our microbiome as well, right? And that plays a huge role. We often hear that saying, moms, put your own oxygen mask on first, right? Like this is like the deeper dive conversation around that, right? Like it emphasizes this. So, I also have a podcast episode of like why prioritizing my health, like putting myself first as a single mom was like important. You can check that episode out. There's more in there. And it's gotten me to the point where I can be more present, more capable of supporting my kids. And it's not just for them. It's like about equipping them to flourish as men and eventually as fathers. And so their children can too, because, that's important to me. I didn't know it was important to me early on when I was in a stress cadet state. But I believe we can make generational health the new wealth. All right, so let's get practical for a minute here. If you're still with me, um, I really think it's important that we don't fall into the trap of blaming our health solely on genetics. Nothing frustrates me more than when people assume their health issues are predetermined by their genes. It's really the environment we are in, right? Like the mindset of, oh, it's my genetics, this is very disempowering. And it's quite frankly, in these times, I think it's irresponsible. And I think it's just something we say because we've heard it a million times and we haven't really taken the time to understand. And it misses an opportunity to take radical personal responsibility now for the state of our own health and the health of our kids. It's health is not just a matter of chance. I think we should know this by now. It's shaped by all these things that we were talking about today. So, educating ourselves helps us really tap into a reservoir of power that allows us to take our control back over of our well-being. And don't you think we could all do a lot better than we currently are? I mean, just look around, right? How many kids do you know have food allergies and EpiPens and medications and holy moly. So I certainly believe that we can. I'm not suggesting I'm snapping my fingers here and you're going to listen to this podcast and bada bing, you're going to go on and figure it out. It's definitely going to take some effort, right? But the more of us that start to do so, the better. And I think, the more you do it and I do it and we all do it, the more other people will see it. And, it's just that ripple effect, right? And then next thing you know, there's going to be more opportunities for healing modalities, the more creative solutions, it'll be more normalized. And that's going to help, avoid that ignorance is bliss paradigm that we've been in for so long, or even just the social stigma of choosing health, very differently than everyone else and being that oddball, or even just cognitive dissonance anymore. Right. So, for me, understanding my mother's health and my health and how it impacted my kids has really been helpful. So I hope you can appreciate that. It just reminds me not to take my well-being for granted. And, it helps me identify my vulnerabilities so I can strengthen them, just because I know kind of the weaknesses I was born with, right? Right. And then it helps me help my kids. So I know all right, I know what was going on when I was pregnant with you and some of the things that are going to be a little more challenging for you. And this is the things that we need to think about and, stuff like that. Right. Why does your brain work this way? And why does his brain work that way? They're just differences and they make a difference. Right. So it's a journey of self-awareness, and it's really the ultimate individuality, which I talk about all the times. We got to get over this cookie cutter, give me the protocol, the RDA amounts of food. We got to get away from that, because bioindividuality is really nuanced and complex and beautiful. Now, what I'm talking about is absolutely not the quick fix that we're used to seeking in modernity. It's the deeper fix, getting to the environment of the roots that led to the causes of each of our chronic health issues. So I really think it's time to build back better for real. So this is for more lasting healing, deeper recovery, or preparing your body for having kids. So the very first thing all of us can do is deeper nourishment, right? Deeper nourishment, quality foods, sourcing, cleaning up your whole home environment, everything that you're using, everything going on inside your home that you can. You don't have to do it overnight. But this establishes stability and safety within your immediate environment and helps your body to also create that safety and stability. And that is absolutely step one. And, you're going to need to have some commitment here to create the space in your life to do all this, to heal. And then you can build on that if that's not taking you far enough and you're still struggling. So what you can do in light of this is start by learning, right? Check in with your mom, talk to her, If she had a lot of health issues, this is helpful to know. Understanding the patterns that you have or she had, it can really help you make more informed health choices, right? And how it's playing a role in your current situation. And then, you can start to make changes now. Like a lot of people are like still in this like, maybe next year or maybe then or maybe this, like today, every single person listening to the episode probably has one thing they're like, they could walk away and do. I mean, just recently I implemented one thing in my life, one thing that I learned about, and it's it's already making a big difference. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is awesome. I'm not over here making massive sweeping changes all the time. And it's like, we don't always have to think that way. But there are small things we can always do. Tweaking our food, moving our bodies in new ways. If we're in a chronic pattern of anything, how can you disrupt the pattern? Are you always stressed about the same thing all the time? Well, okay, guess what? Pause. What can you do differently? Right? Like that's the thing. Someone maybe hasn't shown you this. Maybe your mom didn't figure it out. Maybe she didn't teach it to you, but that doesn't mean that you can't start to do it and build a new healthy lifestyle for yourself and also demonstrate that to your family. Many of us have to be the cycle breakers here. And regularly assess your own health. I talk about seasonal nutrition. I really think at the change of every season, it's like, we have to readjust. We have to make adjustments. This is a great time to like check in, right? Where do you have personal vulnerabilities in your life? What are your weak points? How can you work on strengthening them? If that's something that you don't really know, it's hard for you to do it on your own. You're not really sure. This is where you can get deeper support. You could work with me if that sounds good to you. I have a bunch of ways that we can do this. And you can get help to tailor a health plan specific to your current life situation and your needs. And I do this through my functional nutrition work and mind body coaching work. I look at the, whole picture. I ask a lot of questions. We cover your health history. We get into it. We look at your mineral imbalances and heavy metals through the hair test. And this helps us to see the stress pattern that your body is in now, and has likely been in for a while, and how it's affecting your organs, glands, tissues, energy, how it's affecting your ability to digest and absorb your food and even be able to detoxify well or not. Maybe it's affecting your immune health, right? Like your mood, your mental health. We look at that. We look at what metals might actually be showing currently, as well as like be able to see that your body, could be storing some and not able to like release them. They're currently, deeply in there. The microbiome, this is going to help us see what microbes do you have? Are they robust enough? Do you have enough? What balance are they in, as well as what balance are they into one another? And how does that impact functions that they do for you in your body? So if they're really missing or lacking or imbalanced, they're going to affect a lot of functions. We can also see like what pathogens are present, as well as like how like the extreme imbalance ratios could actually be kind of like toxic to your body, that whole endotoxin piece where it sounds like you're going to have the endotoxins continuously going on and on and on because of your gut. And that's creating a stress response in your body, right? We can see patterns of inflammation, dysbiosis, leaky gut. And we can see certain patterns that can help us consider if even deeper imbalances exist, like H. pylori and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right? So this helps us to start the repair process in a much more targeted way to help your body get out of its stress response and chronic issues. So that's just one example of how you can get some support. And I hope you found this episode helpful. I hope that it gave you pause to think about some things that maybe you hadn't yet. Maybe you have a big takeaway off the top of your head, I would love to hear it if you want to reach out. And I would just encourage you to take one small action step today from this episode, whether it's starting to like think about like, should I talk to my mom and see what's going on with her, or choosing one action that you can like stick with, or, even go further than that, right? So your future self will thank you. You'll be breaking a pattern and creating a new way of being, and your kids will thank you. And if you're planning on having kids, they will be far better off because of anything you can do now to shift these patterns for yourself. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Until next time, stay wild and well.